Beneath the shadow of the great tree called Konoha, one clan has lived under suspicion for generations. Uchiha. Blood and fire. Loyal, yet never submissive. When trust is betrayed. When justice becomes nothing but empty words. Separation. Not born of hatred, but because the path is no longer shared. The Sharingan sees through every lie. The will of Uchiha does not bow to the Hokage. This is a story of choice, and the price paid for freedom. I am Uchiha, the division of Konoha. When a clan steps out of the shadows, secretly descending into the research base, Chidori, lightning flashed, mingling with the sound of birdsong. A bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, and within Uchiha Yoru's base, the Sharingan of the two Sharingan appeared in his eyes. With a single thrust of his newly completed Chidori, the struck figure instantly turned into mud, and in an instant, the sword at his side was unsheathed. Ding ding! In the blink of an eye, the straight sword flashed upwards at the kunai, and the next moment, Uchiha Yoru's figure moved like lightning, directly charging forward. His exquisite swordsmanship flashing down in a blur of cold light. And within the cold light was Orochimaru, who at this moment wore a casual, perverse smile, his hands gripping kunai and constantly parrying. Your swordsmanship isn't bad. If your lightning attribute abilities were further enhanced and you mastered the transformation of chakra properties, then you could truly showcase the power of this sword. Orochimaru's attack hit its target, and in the next instant, a flash of sword light cut through. Immediately, Orochimaru transformed back into a mud clone. Seeing this, Uchiha Yoru let out a cry of surprise. It must be said that the Sannin were terrifying. Their hand seal speed was incredibly fast. After all, Orochimaru's hand seal count in the records had reached its maximum value. Wind release, great breakthrough. Suddenly, a loud shout rang out, and Orochimaru appeared in the air, seemingly out of nowhere. He formed a hand seal and suddenly unleashed a powerful whirlwind from his mouth. But by the time Uchiha Yoru realized what was happening below, it was too late. Seeing the approaching whirlwind, he could only hastily make a defensive gesture. Rumble! In an instant, the ground exploded and crumbled, with a layer of earth rising up as the whirlwind swept down. Finally, as the swirling smoke descended, Orochimaru slowly landed on the ground, smiling hoarsely at the figure emerging from the mist. Heh, so this is the terrifying bloodline ability. Ha! Night Lord, your talent seems to have been unlocked along with the advancement of your bloodline ability. In the short span of 2 months, your chakra talent, whether in quantity or control and manipulation, has surpassed that of ordinary ninjas. Orochimaru, with a hoarse, grinning expression, looked down at the figure in the thick fog with a sinister, artistic gaze, finally letting out a low chuckle. How insightful, very insightful indeed. The human body holds countless treasures. In fact, it's not just clan bloodlines. There are also some ordinary early-stage ninjas who are nothing special. But after reaching a certain critical point and breaking through later on, they suddenly become extremely talented in a particular field. Moreover, the limitations of bloodline abilities become even more apparent. Upon awakening or advancement, the body undergoes a very clear strengthening. The most typical example is Haku, who instantly killed everyone after fully awakening his bloodline ability. He was very weak before fully awakening it. As the dust settled, Uchiha Yoru coughed incessantly, his entire body feeling like it was being pricked by needles. He gritted his teeth and glared at Orochimaru, who was grinning sinisterly in the distance. He then said with a wry smile, "Teacher Orochimaru, you're too cruel." Just now, a C-rank jutsu in Orochimaru's hands was truly like a whirlwind. Of course, he held back, but after the whirlwind swept past, Uchiha Yoru could clearly feel that he was almost unable to breathe. The whirlwind swept through as if he had entered a gravity space, and his whole body felt as if it had been scraped by a steel wire ball. It hurts so much. Looking at Uchiha Yoru, his convenient disciple, Orochimaru revealed a strange, hoarse smile. Haha, you've grown quite well lately. After saying that, Orochimaru's body suddenly transformed into a cloud of white smoke with a loud bang. Uchiha Yoru, watching from afar, immediately showed a wry smile. The Shadow Clone Jutsu, indeed, is incredibly powerful. Without actually experiencing it firsthand, he couldn't understand the terrifying power of a cage-level being. They were simply not on the same level. Now Uchiha Yoro was muttering to himself, truly unable to comprehend how Uchiha Itachi, upon awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan, could instantly defeat Orochimaru. Genius. Geniuses can also be divided into many different types. Seeing that his clothes were all tattered, Uchiha felt a pang of pain and went to change out of his now torn clothes, ripped apart by the whirlwind. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, "These clothes must be expensive." A creaking sound pushed the door open, revealing Orochimaru's research lab where he was carefully changing test tubes, while Uchiha Yoro, now dressed in brand new clothes, entered and, as usual, picked up the documents beside him. Looking at the document in his hand, Uchiha Yoro couldn't help but start taking notes, and at the same time said to Orochimaru, "Teacher Orochimaru, the 7th Division of the Police Department will henceforth follow your orders." Meanwhile, Orochimaru, who was intently watching his experiment, clearly showed a slight change in expression after hearing this, before revealing a forced smile. "Haha, I appreciate the Uchiha's sincerity, but I wonder under what circumstances this so-called deployment is taking place." Upon hearing this, Uchiha Yoro immediately broke into a smile. "Teacher Orochimaru, I am the commander of the 7th Squad, so naturally I will obey your orders." The implication is that, although I'm an Uchiha, I am now completely bound to you, my teacher. Upon hearing these words, Orochimaru revealed an evil smile, slowly put down the object in his hand, turned his head to look at his opportunistic disciple, and immediately burst into laughter. The 7th Squad seems to have become a sieve. Indeed. Uchiha Nightheart noticed this and was secretly startled. He immediately realized that Orochimaru had probably already thoroughly investigated the recent activities in Konoha. Although the 7th Division was a gift from the Uchiha clan to Orochimaru, it was also infiltrated by various forces. After all, large clans never keep just one treasure. Haha, teacher, don't worry, the 7th Squad still has an elite Uchiha clan member. He meant to say, teacher, rest assured, the 7th Squad will handle any troublesome route mission well. After all, he still has this elite unit at his disposal. Clearly, he was referring to Shisui's elite unit. Haha, Ijun, do you know what I saw in your eyes the first time I saw you? Orochimaru suddenly revealed a sinister smile, a sight that piqued Uchiha Yoro's curiosity, prompting her to inquire, "Please explain further, teacher." Even Orochimaru's level of power is so vastly different that any attempt at apprehension would be futile. Especially during this period of time living together, Orochimaru's unique personality and charm were indeed very attractive and reassuring, especially to those who could be exploited. More importantly, Orochimaru had not yet developed a pathological obsession with the Sharingan. All that could be seen was Orochimaru licking his lips with an evil grin, looking at Uchiha Yoro and letting out a hoarse laugh. "Haha, in your eyes, Night Lord, there's a wealth of greed, and a yearning for boundless power." Greed. For the power of ambition. Uchiha Yoro was merely stunned by this assessment, then a smile appeared on his face. He never concealed any of this. After all, in this dangerous shinobi world, even Jonin wouldn't dare claim control over their own lives, let alone him, an Uchiha. His greed was solely for power, paving the way for his own survival. So, does Professor Orochimaru have any plans for the current situation? Clearly, Konoha's actions were all done openly, but Orochimaru seemed to accept them as well. Not only did he not resist, but he also hid in the shadows, which was something he found somewhat inexplicable. Konoha! At this moment, Orochimaru revealed a sinister smile, so sinister that even Uchiha Yoro's neck trembled before he finally withdrew that eerie gaze. They're nothing more than a bunch of rotten people. Power needs to be matched by strength, talent, and sufficient lifespan. If Professor Sarutobi could stay young for 10 years, then your problem wouldn't exist. Uchiha Yoro understood the first half of Orochimaru's sentence, but the second half immediately made him frown in confusion, while inwardly he was secretly terrified, realizing that Orochimaru had now recognized the fragility of life. Life is fragile on the battlefield, and the fact that the former third Hokage, now advanced in age, has begun to focus on political maneuvering, further intensified Orochimaru's awareness of the precariousness of life. No wonder Orochimaru in his later stages was truly an unkillable cockroach. His various ninjutsu techniques were entirely researched and developed specifically for vulnerable life forms. Although aware of these things, Uchiha Yoro could only feign ignorance, pausing before saying, "Teacher Orochimaru." The clan elders said that the Sarutobi clan seems to be preparing to nominate Sarutobi Shinosuke to become the 5th Hokage. Upon hearing these words, Orochimaru's pupils visibly contracted slightly, not as calm as his face suggested, but he still managed to control his emotions well, revealing a contemptuous smile. Sarutobi Shinosuke isn't worth worrying about. At this moment, Orochimaru clearly displayed an unprecedented level of confidence, and this confidence wasn't blind. He had repeatedly distinguished himself as a Sannin in World War II and the Third Great Ninja War, and he wasn't someone who could easily belittle his abilities. Moreover, Orochimaru has now formed a new power base in Konoha, especially after the 4th Hokage's death. Those who were once wavering between the two sides have almost all sided with Orochimaru, while the Hokage's faction is merely a group of clans afraid of having their interests harmed. According to intelligence revealed by Teacher Orochimaru upon his return from the border, the situation at the border, which had just stabilized, seems to be on the verge of further turmoil. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, Uchiha Yura mentioned the current situation at the border. Upon hearing this, Orochimaru licked his lips, chuckled, and said, "The ninja world has never lacked bloodshed. However, all of this will eventually settle down. It's just a matter of time." At this moment, Orochimaru narrowed his eyes, revealing an even greater sense of confidence. They were just a bunch of rotten existences. In his plan, this was the perfect time to let them cause trouble first. And he could use this opportunity to thoroughly research and pursue immortality through ninjutsu. Orochimaru is actually a very approachable person. He just wants to quietly do his research. Perhaps becoming Hokage would allow him to do even better research. Looking at Orochimaru's confident, sinister smile, Uchiha Yoru's eyes revealed a strange expression, and he muttered to himself, "Perhaps your confidence isn't wrong, but it's also because you have too much power. You don't know that in the end, others can easily abandon you." Perhaps Orochimaru never imagined that the Konoha high-ranking officials could be so ruthless. It was truly a case of a brave man cutting off his own hand. For the stability of Konoha and to prevent political upheaval, they directly forced Orochimaru, one of the Sannin, to betray and flee. Perhaps none of the 3rd Hokage, from the very beginning, had anticipated that things would spiral out of control. At most, he only wanted to undermine Orochimaru's prestige, but often, once things begin, they become uncontrollable. Orochimaru decided to use an unchanging, ever-changing political tactic. The final outcome was unknown to others, but Uchiha Yoru was absolutely certain of one thing. Ultimately, he betrayed them and fled. The fact that Konoha's high-ranking officials could make such a decisive move suggests that the power structure under Orochimaru's command is too deeply entrenched, and only a decisive resolution can solve all the problems. Teacher Orochimaru, the village police's prison guards can secretly provide teachers with experimental subjects. All the teacher needs to do is say the word. Knowing Orochimaru's political direction, Uchiha Yoru simply smiled and nodded. Orochimaru said nothing more, which was tantamount to agreeing with his use of the 7th Division of the police force to forge alliances with other clans, and also revealed the issue that truly concerned Orochimaru. As expected, upon hearing about the research, Orochimaru's face immediately showed a wicked smile. Haha, it'll be hard work for Night Lord. Human body experiments, the places they need to find are all ninja test subjects. If it were at the border, it would be easier to handle. After all, there are so many small villages, and ninjas from other countries are constantly on the move, so they can secretly capture them. But now that they've returned to the village, it's a bit more troublesome. But for now, the problem seems to be solved, since the police department's responsibilities have been reduced to overseeing almost all of Konoha's prisons. Isn't it quite normal for prisoners to die in prison? Lord Orochimaru! Just then, a figure slowly entered the research room, respectfully bowing to Orochimaru. However, when Uchiha Yoru saw who had arrived, he was secretly startled. Was this Root? Wearing a mask similar to a cat mask, with green and red patterns intertwined around the edges, while Uchiha Yoru was secretly observing his opponent, Orochimaru revealed a similarly sickly, greedy gaze as he looked at him. Haha, it's the armor. You've arrived just in time. Lie down on the bed. It seemed like these words were a little inaccurate, but the Root ninja lay motionless on the bed, while Uchiha Yoru beside him stared wide-eyed. Watching Orochimaru's greedy gaze as he observed the Root youth, as if he were examining a rare treasure. If Uchiha Yoru hadn't clearly known Orochimaru's personality, this scene could easily have led to misunderstandings. Seemingly noticing Uchiha Yoru's terrified expression, Orochimaru let out a hoarse, excited laugh. "Yokun, this is the unexpectedly successful wood-release test armor. You assist me and take good notes." "Yes." At this moment, Uchiha Yoru also respectfully nodded. He wasn't the kind of person who would readily agree to let someone do whatever they wanted with his body, but then Tenten dragged it out like a 2,000-year-old child, and in the end, he even changed his mind. Actually, changing your mind or not isn't really a big deal. After all, changing your mind is quite normal between life and death, but at least you voluntarily ask them to let you say whatever you want about my body. As long as they give me strength, at least show some good attitude. Even without a conflict of interest, he still held Orochimaru in the highest regard. Besides, Orochimaru, accustomed to similar routines, would place various instruments on the armor of the body and begin some kind of perverse experiment. Drawing blood was a routine procedure. Blood contains. A professional battle ensued, and while Uchiha Yoru lacked sufficient basic knowledge, fortunately he was only taking notes. Only Orochimaru, with a similar pathological state, gazed intently at the various data and precious blood samples that had been collected, captivated by the results. "Lord, do you know what the appearance of this armor represents?" After completing all the examinations, Orochimaru rarely showed any signs of illness or distress, displaying a forced smile. Uchiha Yoru, upon hearing this, immediately turned and said, "Would release." "No, you're wrong." At this moment, Orochimaru directly decided that his disciple should answer, while he himself gazed enthusiastically at the precious document in his hand, his snake-like eyes filled with fanaticism. "This represents the acquisition of bloodline. From nothing to something, even ordinary people can cultivate bloodlines. That's quite something." Looking at Orochimaru in front of him, Uchiha Yoru immediately showed a look of astonishment. It must be said that scientists' brains are truly unconventional. He had originally thought Orochimaru wanted to cultivate a group of wood-release ninjas, albeit a modified version, but at least it was still wood-release. Unexpectedly, now that they were right in front of him, Orochimaru was thinking about cultivating various Kaki-Genkai bloodline abilities. If wood-release can be cultivated, then what about other bloodlines? Bloodline limits. Throughout the entire shinobi world, these mysterious entities have never disappeared. During the Warring States period, the highest level was the clan bloodline, representing immense power, followed by clan secret techniques. If this threat could be overcome, and bloodline abilities could be cultivated and spread, then the entire shinobi world would experience an earthquake. "Teacher Orochimaru, what are you talking about?" At this moment, Uchiha Yoru seemed to have thought of something. Upon seeing this, Orochimaru immediately nodded and said, "Not bad. Although the wood release is inferior to the first Hokages, as long as we can overcome this difficult training hurdle, I can then personally create a bloodline family." Damn! Uchiha Yoru couldn't help but curse inwardly. Why did this train of thought suddenly revert to its original form? He thought Orochimaru would say he wanted to cultivate all the bloodlines in the shinobi world, but instead, it went back to the original form. He really couldn't figure out the train of thought of a scientist at all. But on the surface, Uchiha Yoru feigned excitement. "If Teacher Orochimaru can train a few wood-release ninjas, then we can use them to directly secure the 5th Hokage's position." Uchiha Yoru's agitated demeanor caused the already excited Orochimaru beside him to suddenly feel a chill, a hint of annoyance flashing in his snake-like eyes. Indeed, there's always a slight difference in their perspectives. How could you even think of bringing up this issue? Is it really that great to be the 5th Hokage based on a few wood-release ninjas? Wouldn't it be even greater if he could personally create his own clan's bloodline ability? Just like the legendary Rakudo Sennin, he was a god capable of creating all things. To individuals, to minds, and their lines of thought are completely opposite. Clearly still agitated, Orochimaru suddenly realized that no one could understand his joy, which was quite frustrating. He couldn't help but hoarsely wave his hand and say, "Lord, the armor will stay with me for now. Remember to keep it confidential." It seems Orochimaru obtained the armor from Denzo. Although wood release is precious, the wood release armor can only be considered a weakened version of a Kaki Genkai. Compared to the first Hokage's wood release, The difference is like night and day, so Danzo was willing to part with it. Or perhaps Danzo and Orochimaru are now teaming up to restart the wood release plan, probably hoping to see if they can create a few more wood release ninjas. After all, no one ever thinks too many of these bloodline ninjas are a good thing. What if another first rank wood release user unexpectedly pops up? That would be a disaster. Lord Orochimaru, having just undergone a thorough examination and not knowing how much blood had been drawn, Armor was now slightly shaky after getting out of bed, but he still respectfully bowed to Orochimaru. Orochimaru didn't show much emotion regarding Root's early brainwashing and indoctrination, simply waving his hand casually and saying, "AKA, thank you for your trouble. I'll call you if I need anything." It's quite clear that Danzo sent the armored figure to work under Orochimaru, since Orochimaru is now considered a Root member. Yes, at this moment, the armor was as lifeless as a puppet, devoid of any thoughts or plans for its future. It was truly the most loyal guinea pig. As Uchiha Yoro gazed at the armor and Orochimaru's infatuated expression, he secretly thought to himself, Orochimaru, a talented individual who created a bloodline ability, must also possess some kind of ninjutsu. Returning to the police department, Uchiha Yoro looked exhausted, sitting in his office with leaves occasionally falling from his palms under his desk. The strange thing is that these leaves seem a little off, as if they've been electrocuted, and even as they fall, there are faint electric arcs flashing through them. Uchiha Yoro took a piece of leaf from the drawer and held it in his palm, a smile appearing on his face. It was clear he felt progress. Indeed, after strengthening his physical abilities, his talent was equivalent to strengthening his other talents. Before his eyes were opened, he could only be considered an average, ordinary ninja with decent potential. After activating the Sharingan, he clearly underwent a strengthening process, and he could distinctly feel that his training was much faster than before. Just like how it used to take a month of training to increase his chakra level, and then 10 days to achieve the same result after awakening his bloodline and strengthening his body. Now that he has opened to Magatama Sharingan and further strengthened his physique, his training speed has indeed increased again, completely reaching the level of a genius. Especially in the lightning attribute during cultivation, I can be considered a genius, Uchiha Yoro muttered to himself, a weary smile spreading across his face. In the ninja world, strength is the most fundamental thing. Status alone is not enough. One must also possess a matching level of power. Similarly, until one reaches the level of the first Hokage, or Uchiha Madara, who can single-handedly overpower an entire ninja village, he can only obediently integrate into the group. Teacher Orochimaru, you truly live up to your reputation. Every time he spoke with Orochimaru, he would once again arrange his training direction. As expected, he was indeed a scientist of the shinobi world, directly analyzing his talent and direction. Orochimaru's training plan was to first focus on enhancing the transformation of lightning attribute abilities, and at the same time, strengthen his taijutsu training during these 3 months. After all, with the addition of the Sharingan, the speed of learning ninjutsu was very fast. Just as Uchiha Yoro was contemplating the training direction Orochimaru had arranged for him, there was a sudden knock on the office door. Dong dong dong, come in. The office door swung open, revealing Uchiha Shisui, followed by a female ninja carrying a stack of documents, though she appeared quite young. Uchiha Yoro didn't pay attention either. She just looked at Shisui and smiled, saying, "Shisui, is there something you need?" Looking at Uchiha Yoro's smiling face, which couldn't hide the weariness, Shisui felt a pang of shame. His elder brother had suffered too much for the clan. "Yes, boss. The 7th Squad's personnel have all been recruited. Here is the list of everyone in the squad." A thick stack of documents lay directly on the table, each sheet containing a ninja's photograph background and even details about their school's academic achievements, substitute teachers, and even their mentors who led them after graduation. "Yes, boss, this is Utsugi Yugao. She's quite skilled at handling work-related documents." At this moment, Uchiha Shisui revealed a smile as he introduced the female ninja behind him, knowing that he had deliberately chosen her himself to reduce his boss's workload. "My lord, I am Utsugi Yugao. Please take good care of me in the future." At this moment, Utsugi Yugao, with her innocent and naive appearance, revealed 3 parts excitement, 4 parts hesitation, and 3 parts helplessness. She completely resembled a ninja who had just emerged from her humble dwelling. Although Uchiha Yoru's face showed no emotion at this sight, a powerful wave of emotion surged within him. Itsuki Yugo. No wonder she looks so familiar, with her long purple hair and shy, innocent face. Uchiha Yoru, on the other hand, is deep in thought something doesn't seem right. Yes, boss, Itsuki Yugo comes from a commoner family. She just graduated last year. She graduated with a perfect score in her cultural studies. And she's also very capable of assisting the police department. Uchiha Shisui's relieved smile faded considerably. It was clear they were looking for an assistant, a so-called office secretary, or simply someone to boss around in the office. Ultimately, each department has its own assistants. In the administrative field, the majority of the personnel are women, while in the martial arts field, it's elite ninjas. Seeing Shisui's kind demeanor, Uchiha Yoru also smiled. Looking at the young and inexperienced Itsuki Yugo, who had only recently graduated, he smiled again. Okay, you go down and get familiar with the work first. Thank you, sir. Itsuki Yugo immediately bowed 90 degrees in gratitude, her face beaming with an excited smile, full of dreams for the future. But just as Itsuki Yugo went outside and closed the door, Uchiha Yoru's smile gradually turned cold. Similarly, the innocent look in Utsugi Yugao's eyes disappeared as she closed the door, while Shisui, standing beside her, didn't notice anything. The employee mentioned on the first page of the document is Utsugi Yugo. Uchiha Yoru, squinting at the document, said that she graduated from ninja school at the age of 11, more than half a year ago. Her master was an ordinary chunin, and her teammates were all civilians. She was described as cautious and also possessed a rudimentary understanding of medical ninjutsu. Her greatest skill was swordsmanship. Yes, big brother. Shisui looked at Uchiha Yoru, who was constantly reviewing documents, and immediately showed a puzzled expression. After flipping through all the documents, Uchiha Yoru's eyes flashed with cold light. He looked up at Shisui with a grim expression, startling the latter. Shisui, the 7th Division of the police department, is indeed riddled with infiltration. What? Shisui was still bewildered, but Uchiha Yoru, clearly displeased, slammed the 3 individuals' files onto the table. Uchiha Shisui might not have been politically enlightened, but he was still an elite jonin. When he saw his older brother pull out these 3 documents, his face immediately darkened, because one of them was about Itsugi Yugo. It's worth noting that he had specifically selected this information. Not only was her background impeccable, but he had also placed this document at the very top. Yes, boss, do you want to or not? At this moment, Shisui, having gone through so many dark things for Root, no longer had the naivety he once did. A cold glint appeared in his eyes, as if he were asking whether or not to slit someone's throat. Seeing this scene, Uchiha Yoru rubbed his eyebrows in frustration. After staring intently at the 3 people's information, he finally shook his head and said, I only got this information about these 3 people by chance from Teacher Orochimaru. As for how many others are secretly involved, nobody knows. While secretly keeping an eye on these 3, Shisui, you should also secretly check everyone else. Don't stir up trouble. It's enough to make people secretly stare at Utsugi Yugo and Gekko Hayate. As for this Yakushi Kabuto, he's a Root member. Yakushi Kabuto, Gekko Hayate, and Utsugi Yugo, these were the 3 pieces of information he extracted, and he knew that otherwise no one could have found them. But upon hearing this, Shisui felt a surge of anger, and his dissatisfaction with Root only intensified. The Uchiha clan practically brought this 7th independent squad out, which is entirely under Lord Orochimaru's command, and even the dark glove of Root. And yet, despite all our hard work and dirty tricks, you still don't trust us and secretly deploy spies. This is what infuriates Shisui the most. Uchiha Yoru also shook his head, but inwardly he sneered, thinking, knowing isn't scary, not knowing is. Shisui, Utsugi Yugo's callous palms just now proved she'd been practicing swordsmanship since childhood. This point is consistent with the information. After all, she's a commoner ninja. As for which faction she belongs to, you don't need to dig deep, just secretly keep an eye on them. Yes, big brother. Seeing Uchiha Yoru not letting him dig deeper, Shisui immediately showed a hesitant expression, but Knight's face instantly turned serious as he said in a low voice, Shisui, obey the order. Yes. Uchiha Shisui responded reflexively, but his heart was filled with doubt. Why didn't brother Yi let him continue investigating? Moreover, judging from the look in Brother Yi's eyes when he saw the identities of these three people, there was disbelief and pain. Could it be? Could it be? The more Uchiha Shisui thought about it, the more terrified he became. He didn't dare think any further and involuntarily lowered his head. Uchiha Yoru, seeing this, secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If she had told Shisui directly, the effect would have been significantly reduced. Conversely, the less likely a direct investigation would be conducted, the more restless the person behind it would become. When Shisui secretly investigated and discovered the mastermind, he would know everything. From the very beginning, he feigned an expression of pain and fear, making Shisui believe that he already knew who these three people were. However, for the sake of the village and his family, he directly ordered no investigation. When Shisui learned the truth, he would only realize how heavy a burden he was carrying. Because of the Uchiha clan, he was really worried. After all, he didn't want to personally experience the night of their clan's annihilation a few years later. Although Utsugi Yugo and Gekko Hayate are a couple with a tragic fate, as seen in the original work, both are members of the Anbu. But when did the Anbu begin training them? He didn't know this much, but one thing he could confirm was that Konoha was currently short of personnel, and with the third Hokage emerging from seclusion once again, he would undoubtedly focus on cultivating and developing his own faction. An Anbu member. Uchiha Nightheart chuckled coldly. Sending someone of this age to infiltrate the organization was indeed the most careless thing to do. During the Chunin exam, both of these individuals were exceptional jonin. Gekko Hayate was somewhat understandable, given his bloodline ability, but wasn't the see-through jutsu the best stealth jutsu for ninjas? Therefore, Utsugi Yugo was just an ordinary civilian. Discovering promising individuals and nurturing them in the shadows early on is a common tactic used by the Anbu, and Yakushi Kabuto is no exception. Everyone knows he's a member of Root. Yes, boss, so do they want to dismiss them at will, or should we assign them work in prison? Knowing full well that the opponent was a spy sent by a powerful force within the village, Uchiha Shisui decided against attacking, even if it meant engaging in a fight that would eventually reach the border. However, Uchiha Yoru feigned a weary, pale-faced expression, waving his hand and sighing, saying, "You can only be prepared for a short time, not for a lifetime. Just pretend you don't know. Since you've already arranged for Utsugi Yugo to be by my side, don't disturb her. As for these two, Gekko Hayate's profile is quite common, so let's assign him to the security patrol team as usual. Yakushi Kabuto's profile indicates he's relatively skilled in medical ninjutsu, so let's assign him to the logistics team. Remember not to alarm these three." Transparent. Uchiha Yoru chose not to alarm these three people. After all, if they already knew their backgrounds, pretending not to know was the best course of action. Otherwise, if they sent more spies, they would be completely blind. Shisui, you secretly continue your investigation. Say how many of the recruits this time are still problematic. Uchiha Yoru didn't believe there were only a few like that, insisting there were more. Shisui, upon hearing this, showed a serious expression and felt a pang of sadness in his heart. Why would a village be so wary of the Uchiha? In a village near the border, there is a private orphanage. The beautiful sunlight shone down, filling the air with joyful excitement as the little children smiled brightly. However, upon witnessing this scene, a young man with round eyes revealed a complex expression deep within his gaze. "Thank you, sir, for providing funding to the orphanage." Wearing a white headscarf and dressed like a nun, Yakushi Nanu, the pharmacist, displayed a sincere, gentle, and grateful smile on her face. Looking at this woman radiating maternal affection, Uchiha Yoru smiled and waved her hand, saying, "We represent Teacher Orochimaru. You're too kind." Teacher Orochimaru couldn't come because of his heavy workload, so he specifically instructed me to come here myself. He also asked the director not to hesitate to ask me if the orphanage needed clothes or food. He could come directly to the 7th Division of the police department to find me. Both men wore fake smiles on their faces, but no one could tell that this time. The 7th Division of the police department, representing Orochimaru, had come to pay their respects, escorting to members of their squad. Uchiha Yoru and the pharmacist Yakushi Nanu walked towards the orphanage's living room, chatting and laughing. Outside, the orphans were playing and arguing, but Yakushi Kabuto, secretly giving food to the orphans with a fake smile, was watching Uchiha Yoru, who had followed the director inside. His thoughts unknown. The director's office. My lord, please have some tea. With a gentle, motherly smile, the pharmacist Yakushi Nanu would never have guessed that this woman was Konoha's most famous spy, the legendary spy ninja the Shrine Maiden. Director, you're being too polite. During this time, Uchiha Yoru had also adapted to his current position, becoming increasingly accustomed to the fake, political smile on his face. Looking at the figure before him, he narrowed his eyes and gently set the teacup in his hand aside. Just tell us what the orphanage needs. Although we can't afford a large amount of funding, we can still manage to provide enough food for the orphanage to survive from day to day. Just as pharmacist Yakushi Nanu was about to express his gratitude, Uchiha Yoru narrowed his eyes and uttered the next sentence, causing him to tremble. In the end, you didn't let this price down, did you? Go, witch? The words seemed to carry a heavy weight in the air, yet pharmacist Yakushi Nanu wore a bewildered expression, as if she hadn't understood at all. My lord! Without the slightest hint of fault in pharmacist Yakushi Nanu, Uchiha Yoru revealed a smile, gently shaking his head and saying, Director, from now on, the police department will ensure the orphanage's food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. I wouldn't dare say everyone will be well fed and clothed, but absolutely no one will starve to death. Director, you should understand this better than anyone else. This time, after the matter was clarified directly, pharmacist Yakushi Nanu, worthy of being Konoha's most outstanding spy, showed no change in expression whatsoever. Uchiha Yoru, however, simply waved his hand and rubbed his eyebrows. He didn't want to put on a show in front of these people. It was too tiring. My teacher is Orochimaru, the Vice Minister of Root, the head of the institute. Everything you've been hiding from me is nothing. After a concise and decisive explanation, a cold glint flashed in the eyes of pharmacist Yakushi Nanu, but the smile on her face remained unchanged. She slowly picked up her teacup and gently took a sip. Neither of them spoke for a long while before she finally spoke. What does your excellency wish to do? Although still maintaining a cheerful and amiable demeanor, his face showed less friendliness and more a sense of distance. Uchiha Yoru, meanwhile, gazed out the window at the children playing outside, a rare hint of relief in his eyes. Yakushi Nanu, rest assured, I am not Root. Root's existence is inevitable, but I don't like being treated like that by their own people. Looking out the window, he revealed a relieved smile. The police department will provide your orphanage with a monthly food allowance. The requirements are very simple, so rest assured. Although it's the same as needing the children of your orphanage to work, the work will be completely different. After completely tearing away the disguise, pharmacist Yakushi Nanu was filled with anxiety. What worried her most now were these children, and she didn't believe a word the other person said. Teacher Orochimaru visited the orphanage, a moment to remember the village. Director, you said that teacher Orochimaru is now in hiding. And it seems like we haven't heard the teacher's voice in the village for a long time. Muttering a sentence under her breath, she instantly made the pharmacist Yakushi Nanu beside her frown. She wasn't an ordinary person. She naturally understood the implication. Teacher Orochimaru's charitable work is causing trouble for the headmaster. And later, if any of the orphanage's children show potential to enter the ninja academy, the police department will provide assistance, of course. You don't need to worry. The reward is also very simple. After all of this is for teacher Orochimaru. For pharmacist Yakushi Nanu, there was no conflict of interest. In fact, the other party needed his funding even more. Therefore, Uchiha Yoru was somewhat lenient. After all, he had leverage over the other party. Upon hearing this, pharmacist Yakushi Nanu frowned, a look of seriousness appearing on her face. She still harbored some doubts. Is that all that's needed? Pharmacist Yakushi Nanu wasn't a fool. People were saying that Lord Orochimaru had infiltrated and was hiding, and now Konoha seemed to have a silent force suppressing the Sanin's voices. What the enemy needed was for their orphanage students to spread Orochimaru's name. Wasn't this going against their own village? Worried, the intelligent pharmacist Yakushi Nanu instantly thought of a point. The 7th Division of the police department, as long as the other party still existed, there would always be people speaking up for Orochimaru. The orphanage was just a small place. Seeing the skeptical look on the pharmacist Yakushi Nanu's face, Uchiha Yoru immediately smiled and said, Teacher Orochimaru's assessment of the Shrine Maiden was full of praise. So the headmistress is truly a priceless treasure. Coming towards me? Apothecary Yakushi Nanu immediately showed a serious expression, calmly looking at the other party. As the most outstanding spy, a strong heart was the most important thing. As the two men in the office chatted, their smiles and playful children could be seen through the large tree by the window. Yakushi Kabuto's eyes flashed with a glint of light. Although he couldn't hear what they were saying, he could understand their conversation through their lip movements. From initial worrying to relief, his expression suddenly changed, revealing a serious look. In his office, Uchiha Yoru left no trace of a glance through the window. He naturally noticed Yakushi Kabuto silently observing him from under the large tree outside, but he deliberately ignored it. The head of the medical ninjutsu department is excellent, and the police department is willing to invite him to take some time each month to provide guidance on medical ninjutsu to the police. Logistics department. At this point, Uchiha Yoru suddenly looked towards Yakushi Kabuto, who was playing with children outside, and a smile suddenly appeared on her lips. Yes, headmaster, do you recognize that child? Yakushi Nanu, being the most skilled spy, naturally discovered the person secretly eavesdropping outside, but she remained calm and composed. Or perhaps she preferred to expose the entire orphanage to Kanaha's watchful eyes, because the power struggles above were never something she could participate in. That child's name is Yakushi Kabuto, also from this orphanage. The director should be very familiar with him. Yes, this child is from Root. Yakushi Kabuto was only 13 years old at the time, and although he was already an excellent spy, his expression suddenly changed when he was discovered. Big brother, what's wrong with you? The children, naturally noticing that their older brother, the ninja, had a slightly troubled expression, innocently voiced their thoughts out of curiosity. Yakushi Kabuto, however, instantly regained his composure, displaying that kind and friendly smile. He wiped away his tears and, smiling, said to the children, "It's all right. Come, big brother will tell you a ninja story." While Yakushi Kabuto was in a cheerful mood, playing happily with other children, inwardly he was experiencing a storm of emotions. Uchiha Yoru had discovered his true identity long ago. When had he been exposed? Director, are you all right? At this moment, Yakushi Kabuto's mind was in turmoil, and in the pharmacist's office, Yakushi Nanu also showed signs of panic. The most powerful spy in Konoha was in a state of panic. The surname pharmacist, coupled with the name bag, reminded her of something unpleasant. A quick glance through the window was enough for her to immediately take a deep breath and respond calmly. In an instant, this most outstanding spy from Konoha analyzed everything. In her mind, she recalled the photos Root had sent her each one a bag of pictures. The person's appearance gradually changed, becoming somewhat mature and rough, while the child on the outside was relatively delicate and gentle. She immediately thought of a certain possibility. Although she felt intense disgust towards Root, she felt even more deeply powerless. Uchiha Yoru, enjoying himself immensely, gently sipped his hot tea, a smile playing on his lips, as if he were savoring this feeling of power. After a full half-day had passed, Uchiha Yoru finally put down his teacup and finished drinking it. Looking at the pharmacist Yakushi Nanu, who still wanted to refill his tea, he smiled and waved his hand, saying, "From now on, the Yakushi Kabuto squad will be responsible for liaising with the police department and the orphanage. Supplies will be delivered every month. Transparency is key. Thank you, my lord." Yakushi Nanu, the pharmacist, showed a respectful attitude towards this younger Uchiha and even less powerful individual. This is where power comes in. As long as you remain within this group, power can firmly wield intimidation, and therefore rules must be followed. The news must be conveyed to Danzo immediately. Teacher Orochimaru's intention is simple. Neither side will act rashly, and the orphanage will also be safe and will not be involved. Uchiha Yoruichi's face lit up with relief as he smiled and said, "This time, I can't fool the Anbu and Root in the village. I've come in person, using my identity." If there wasn't something else going on, no one would believe it. Therefore, his purpose in coming here was to use the orphanage's children to spread the Senin's prestige, making Orochimaru's name once again vibrant in the schoolyard, streets, and alleys. This was his obvious goal, and he wasn't afraid of what the villagers would say, since everyone would assume Orochimaru had begun his counterattack. Haha, the head of the Institute's tea is excellent. We'll keep in touch often afterwards. Standing up, he smiled and patted the legendary female ninja on the shoulder, nodding in return. The pharmacist Yakushi Nanu also smiled and nodded, saying, "You are too kind, sir." It seemed as if the two were having a normal conversation, yet there was a strange undertone to it. The apothecary Yakushi Nanu's forced smile betrayed a hint of bitterness. She knew the other party was trying to manipulate her. Orochimaru's disciple was using her as leverage, and more importantly, the other party's intentions were clear. They wanted her to become a double agent. She is Root, and after today, Danzo will definitely contact her. Root wants to know Danzo's whereabouts, and Danzo also wants to know Root's whereabouts. "My lord, the orphanage will be under your care from now on." In that brief moment, pharmacist Yakushi Nanu also secretly made up her mind. Now that Orochimaru had become the fifth Hokage, the chances were not small. She wouldn't say 100%, but she was definitely 70 to 80% certain. She also knew that if she won the bet, the orphanage's future days would be tied to the Hokage, and she would no longer have to worry about the orphanage's supplies. Therefore, this request for consideration was her way of showing her attitude. Uchiha Yoru, upon hearing this, immediately smiled and nodded, saying, "Dean, you're too kind. It's all for the sake of the village." At this moment, Uchiha Nightheart sneered even more coldly. "Danzo, you old scoundrel, I'll plant a double agent in your root first and return the favor in kind." Pharmacist Yakushi Nanu? Haha, that's just a facade. Everyone's focus will probably be on forgetting someone else, and nobody right now. Upon returning from the orphanage to the police station, Yakushi Kabuto respectfully reported the information he had gathered from the orphanage. "My lord, the orphanage now has 238 orphans, 13 of whom can extract chakra, a director, and a vice director." Returning to his office, Uchiha Yoru narrowed his eyes as he listened to the brief report, observing the seemingly ordinary Yakushi Kabuto before him. No one would have imagined how great the future achievements of this young man, who possessed no bloodline ability whatsoever, would be. The 3 recent battles, followed by the nine-tailed fox's night, have left the village in such a dire state of affairs that the orphanage is powerless to help. These supplies were also obtained by me through a struggle within the police department. With a smile that wasn't quite a smile, Yakushi Kabuto looked at the young man before him, then intelligently revealed a cheerful expression and nodded, saying, "Rest assured, sir. This bag is the subordinate of an adult." Can these words be believed? Uchiha Yoru chuckled and shook his head. He didn't believe it, but he did trust Yakushi Kabuto. Yakushi Kabuto's current threat is the orphanage director, and the director's threat is directed at the orphanage children, including Yakushi Kabuto himself. This is a global ailment. The ninja forces are powerful, and therefore the ninja world is plagued by countless tragedies. Gently tapping the table a few times, Yakushi Kabuto, just as he was about to utter a few words, revealed the seal on his tongue. Uchiha Yoru nodded slightly. "Kabuto, you come from an ordinary background, but your talent in medical ninjutsu is extraordinary. Study medical ninjutsu diligently." "Yes, sir." Although Yakushi Kabuto appeared calm, a cold sweat broke out all over his back. He had been exposed. But for the sake of the dean, he had no choice but to reveal himself, even becoming the enemy's spy. A double agent. He's the real killer. The director is just putting on a show. After Yakushi Kabuto left the office with a normal report, Uchiha Yoru secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He really needed Yakushi Kabuto. One possibility is that the opponent in front of him could grant him an extra pair of eyes en route, and another is that the opponent has a talent for healing ninjutsu. Yamato's wood release has already been created by humans, so naturally, other bloodline abilities could also be used. The bloodline abilities in the system are too expensive, perhaps intentionally problematic, but combining the two would solve all the issues. One final point, which can also be considered a complete tragedy reflecting this state of the world's illness: Konoha Prison. The police department is responsible for Konoha's safety and security, and the 3 major prisons in the village are all under the supervision of the Uchiha clan. Outside the ordinary prison cell, 2 elite Uchiha were on high alert, observing the surroundings. Not only this place, but even the guards outside the prison seemed intent on the wind, ready to trigger a signal at the slightest carelessness. The room was spotlessly clean. No one would have imagined that the prison below would have such a room. A strong, pungent smell of disinfectant filled the air, and the operating room was bustling with activity. Meanwhile, outside the operating room, Uchiha Yoru, with his eyes narrowed, gripped a leaf between two fingers, continuously practicing the transformation of chakra. At his feet lay countless leaves, charred black by electricity, some missing parts and reduced to ashes. Yes, big brother. Just as Uchiha Shisui was carrying a prisoner into the room, he came out. However, the moment Shisui stepped out, his body was instantly pinned against the wall, causing him to cry out in pain. One hand grabbed him by the collar, and Shisui, faced with such an attack, merely narrowed his pupils so quick, and then offered no retaliation. At that moment, Uchiha Yoru's hands gripped his collar tightly, lifting him up, his eyes, emanating from the Magatama, moving downwards, filled with overwhelming power. Uchiha Shisui, what's going on with the prisoner surgery today? Didn't I say we only needed those who deserved to die? Shisui tried to suppress his chest discomfort, staring intently at Uchiha Yoru, who, feeling embarrassed, spoke in a hoarse, strained voice. Yes, big brother. There aren't enough prisoners in the prison, and besides, he's the only one who's a good match for the original eye. The pressure on his chest slowly eased, and Shisui was finally able to breathe normally. Uchiha Yoru, however, frowned. The village's 3 great prisons. Couldn't they find a suitable one? Yes, boss. In prison, prisoners who commit heinous crimes are either sent to participate in human body experiments or have their organs transplanted. There aren't enough people, and besides, there are quite a lot of people watching the village lately. At this point, Uchiha Shisui showed an even stronger sense of weariness. Brother, the clan's territory is being closely watched by the Anbu. As Shisui uttered these words, his eyes revealed 3 parts helplessness, 4 parts resentment, and the remaining 3 parts anger. Just then, the operating room light suddenly came on. The large door immediately opened, and Uchiha Yoru and Shisui walked in as if nothing had happened. Haha, thank you, Lord Yoru. Otherwise, I really don't know when my back would have recovered. A middle-aged ninja from the Inuzuka clan, adjusting the bandage wrapped around his waist, spoke with a flattering smile, and Uchiha Yoru, seeing this, responded with a smile and nodded. Where, Lord Inuzuka, you are a hero of Konoha. You have toiled and contributed greatly for so many years, even suffering a back injury for Konoha. We are all doing this for Konoha. Seeing how politely they were speaking, Inuzuka's smile deepened, and he waved his hand, saying, haha, it's all for Konoha, for the village. Although the Uchiha are now isolated, the 7th Division of the police force is not the same. Its representative is Orochimaru. And the clandestine human trafficking deals are now something that the major clans covet. My lord, this is a well-prepared medicine. As long as it's used on time, and there are no rejection reactions during the first half of the year, then check it every 3 months thereafter. Everything will be fine. Besides putting on a medical mask, the ninja came out and handed over the prepared medicine while smiling and talking. Inuzuka, who had just undergone surgery and looked clearly weak, immediately broke into a smile upon hearing these words. You're too kind. I'm really bothering you too much. A group of seasoned veterans descended, Inuzuka bravely escorted by Chen in disguise from the secret passage out of the prison, leaving only 4 individuals in the operating room. The surgeon, Yakushi Kabuto, who had just removed the kidney from his mouth, revealed a warm smile. He then respectfully reported with a faint grin, Inuzuka's 2 kidneys have been completely replaced, and this prisoner has had his kidneys replaced with nearly necrotic ones. After this major surgery, I'm afraid he won't last more than 2 months. But when it came to a surgical assistant, you could tell at a glance that the person was from the Hyuga clan. Another man in a hospital bed, dressed in a prisoner's uniform, was in a coma, unaware that while he was unconscious, both of his kidneys had been surgically removed. Uchiha Yoru listened to the report from the bag, then nodded slightly and said solemnly, keep it a secret. If anything happens to this prisoner, just say he died of illness. Yes, sir. Upon emerging from prison, Uchiha Yoru found himself bathed in sunlight, but in Shisui's eyes, it felt as if he were still in darkness. Shisui, from now on, the organ trafficking operations in the prison will be handled by the Hyuga clan. The Uchiha only need to maintain vigilance and be prepared for retreat at any time. Yes, big brother. Shisui respectfully replied. Since the Nine-Tails night last year, less than a year had passed, and he had experienced so much, especially countless events that had completely redefined his perspective. In the village within the prison, the number of unnamed prisoners who fell ill and died in the last 2 months seems to have increased slightly, but this hasn't drawn much attention. However, the number of seriously ill people has been considerably higher. Taking advantage of the situation, many of the prisoners in jail are serious offenders, and it's virtually impossible to get out without several decades in prison. However, anyone who has been in jail for 15 years or more is almost always placed on the blacklist. In the village, among the powerful clans, there are quite a few ninja whose old friendships have relapsed, and some have suffered organ damage leading to critical illnesses. And the recent clandestine transactions have been aimed at resolving their urgent needs. No one wants to die, and even fewer want to drag themselves along with a deteriorating, serious illness, especially ninjas who have experienced the peak of their careers. They all fear death. Prisoners, however, can be matched with them. If the match is successful, they can receive organ transplants or even organ replacements. And all of this was built upon Orochimaru's research and development of advanced techniques, resulting in almost perfect organ transplants. Shisui, we can't do these things for Lord Orochimaru. Root and the Secret Anbu would do the same. The only difference is that our techniques and raw materials are relatively better. Nohara Rin, a Chunin-level medical ninja, was able to perform transplant surgery in such a tense battlefield situation, which speaks volumes about the level of Konoha's medical ninjutsu, especially in organ transplantation. Ninjas, being constantly engaged in combat missions, inevitably face collisions and conflicts, making organ transplants a life-saving technique. The difference is that in villages, they must be mindful of the impact and can only carry out these procedures secretly, but they almost always use condemned prisoners or those already in the country. But their methods became even more common. After all, there were so many prisoners in the village prison, it would be a waste not to use them. More importantly, ninjas can only have ninja organs transplanted. Organ transplants from ordinary people will result in rejection. Uchiha Shisui, having experienced too much darkness by now, and knowing that he was ultimately dealing with prisoners, was still better than treating human lives as worthless. He nodded and said, "Yes, big brother, I understand." "No, you still don't understand. Do you know why Orochimaru made the Uchiha secretly team up with the Hyuga to do this?" At this moment, Uchiha Yor revealed that expression, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. There was nothing he could do. Shisui's potential was enough to prove everything. He clearly had the opportunity but chose not to see it. To make Shisui switch allegiance to the Hokage faction, that would be utter nonsense. Looking at Uchiha Shisui's bewildered eyes, Uchiha Yoru silently shook his head. A genius ninja, yet politically clueless. Number wonder in the original story he could be so easily swayed that he couldn't find his way back to the north. If Uchiha Itachi was stubborn in his convictions, then Shisui was politically naive, placing too much trust in the Hokage faction, only to choose to rely on his own judgment when betrayed. From this point, it's clear that Shisui never considered exterminating his clan. If Shisui were immortal, the night of the clan's extermination would likely have been even more turbulent. Shisui, the Uchiha are isolated. This is our opportunity. At this moment, Uchiha Knight spoke in a slightly low voice. The people in the shadows trade in organs. Have you noticed that almost all of their contacts are within the major clans? They need healthy bodies, and the Uchiha need connections. After the transactions, the major clans will have countless connections with the Uchiha. This is politics, he muttered to himself. His approach isn't just stubbornness. Although he has ulterior motives, if you can secretly treat patients, why can't he? Konoha's organ transplant treatment is a procedure only understood by the Jonin elite. Those below Jonin level have no qualifications or need to undergo it, unless they are members of a major clan. In comparison, the medical department, which scrutinizes too many people, is relatively conservative, only employing death row prisoners, spies, and similar individuals. The police department, on the other hand, is either tacitly sanctioned by the government or operates clandestinely without a license, naturally without as many concerns. That night, Big Brother, why did you want to involve the Hyuga clan? The Uchiha were isolated and needed this, but the Hyuga weren't isolated. Seeing Shisui's skeptical look, Uchiha Yor shook his head and said, "Shisui, one thing is the internal affairs of the Hyuga clan. And the other thing you're wrong about is that the Hyuga clan isn't the only one involved. It's not that they're secretly doing this. They just need to come here to perform organ transplants, and that's how they'll expose their weaknesses. Because all of this is based on violating ninja regulations. To put it bluntly, it's about dragging everyone down with you. Once the number reaches a certain point, this becomes a terrifying force. Shisui, you should properly hand over your duties to the Hyuga clan in prison. You're not suited for darkness. You should stand in the sunlight. Suddenly, the tone shifted, and Shisui, upon hearing this, was stunned. From the weariness in his eyes and the forced smile, a strong sense of guilt welled up inside him. It was as if Big Brother Yi had been constantly enduring the darkness and training for the sake of the family and the village, and he had been the one holding him back. Yes, Big Brother, I will definitely do my best. Without waiting for Shisui to reassure him, Uchiha Yora laughed and waved his hand, saying, Shisui, you've misunderstood. There are plenty of things to do at the police department, so you don't need to worry too much about this. From now on, Shisui, you'll be in charge of the police department's work. And remember to properly guide Itachi. Absolutely don't let Itachi take the wrong path. Yes, Big Brother. Seeing Shisui's assurance, Uchiha Yora also secretly nodded. Now that Shisui no longer had such fervent adoration for the Hokage faction, and even harbored doubts about the current high-ranking officials, it was almost hard to trust him anymore. Let alone the fact that only Itachi remained loyal to the Hokage. After all, both of these individuals possess Mangekyo Sharingan potential. The Uchiha clan, renowned as the strongest clan, certainly doesn't lack elite jonin, but this cage-level expert is a crucial figure, a stabilizing force. And then there's the terrifying power of the Mangekyo Sharingan. It's safe to say he went to great lengths for his family. Root. Lord Danzo, this is the latest intelligence report from the police department, in which the Uchiha and Hyuga clans are secretly using their power and influence to profit from organ transplants. When Yakushi Kabuto returned to Root, he respectfully presented the intelligence he had gathered, but Danzo, upon seeing it, revealed a sinister, cold smile in his eyes. Haha, it seems the Uchiha and Hyuga are determined to side with Orochimaru. As Danzo spoke these words, his gaze remained coldly fixed on Yakushi Kabuto. After all, he knew that the other man had been to an orphanage, but seeing the other's calm demeanor, and the information he had gathered in secret, it seemed that the two had not spoken or acknowledged each other. Regarding this point, Danzo could only inwardly chuckle coldly. Organ trading was nothing compared to what he knew Orochimaru had done experiments on human bodies far more serious than this. This intelligence report only served to dispel his suspicions about Yakushi Kabuto, the Hokage in his office. At this moment, the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, smacked his lips and took a drag on his cigarette, the thick smoke billowing down. He frowned. Standing before him was Utsugi Yugao, who had come to report on the mission. A powerful trading force. He was eyeing the sway of various factions, and Sarutobi Hiruzen frowned even more. In just 2 months, 38 members of major clans had established dealings with the Uchiha clan. Tichnan, have you discovered anything recently? Although Tichnan was young, and even after graduating she caught the attention of the Anbu because of her decent aptitude, she was the best candidate to approach the Uchiha clan. One reason was her female status, another was her commoner background, and yet another was intelligence. Itsugi Yugao had undergone nearly half a year of training with the Anbu, and this time, his infiltration into the police force as a spy was also a tactic he employed. Lord Hokage, the 7th Division of the police department hasn't made any major moves in the past 2 months, but it seems that the entire department is beginning to shift its approach to maintaining public order. Itsugi Yugao respectfully knelt on one knee and continued. Now, due to the influence of the police force, their conduct towards ordinary citizens is strictly adhering to established rules. While they are showing some leniency towards ninjas and powerful aristocratic families. Upon hearing these words, Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyebrows furrowed in understanding. He had naturally heard about the police department's tactics. In his mind, it was merely a way for Orochimaru to rally support and send out his own political signals. But it was precisely this political signal that further fueled Sarutobi Hiruzen's aversion. Now that Konoha was gradually stabilizing, things couldn't continue like this, otherwise it would be detrimental to the village's restoration of peace. Lord Hokage, this is the list of members for the 7th squad of the police department. Finally, Utsugi Yugao respectfully brought out the list she had compiled. acknowledging that her hard work over such a long period had yielded results. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at the names on the list, and a serious expression immediately appeared in his eyes. Orochimaru's methods were still as ruthless as ever, but they seemed somewhat different from Orochimaru's usual methods. Teichnon, you know how dangerous the Uchiha clan is, and the Ninetales disaster cannot be repeated, so I need you to take another step forward. Each of the envoys uttered a single sentence, instantly causing Utsugi Yugao below to show a respectful expression. Hokage-sama, rest assured. Teichnon will certainly quickly gain the trust of the Uchiha clan, thereby obtaining intelligence within the Uchiha clan. Haha, you're young, there's no need to be so rigid. I believe the Uchiha clan is also a part of the village. Sarutobi Hiruzen wore a gentle smile, but inwardly he was calculating. He needed the Uchiha to have his eyes and ears. Anbu. Minister, this is intelligence gathered recently. Having just finished reporting to the Hokage, Utsugi Yugao, being an Anbu member, naturally had to return to the Anbu headquarters to report back. The difference lies in the fact that the Hokage's gentle smile is merely a fleeting glance at intelligence, a gesture of comfort, while the Anbu prioritize completing the mission above all else, to the point where the process is unimportant. Although the Anbu minister wore a mask, her long hair and figure immediately revealed her to be a woman. This person was the third Hokage's eldest daughter-in-law. She calmly read the intelligence Utsugi Yugao handed over, but behind her mask, a hint of displeasure flickered in her brow. Utsugi Yugao, the reason you were assigned to go undercover was because of your age and your status, making you easily approachable. However, after such a long time, you've only gathered superficial intelligence. The 7th Division of the Police Department hasn't obtained a single piece of genuine intelligence. Facing the Anbu minister's stern reprimand, Utsugi Yugao knelt on one knee, respectfully bowing her head and listening to the reprimand. Finally, after a long moment of silence, the Anbu minister set aside the intelligence report and said, Teichnon, the Ninetales rebellion is very likely a Uchiha conspiracy. The Uchiha are too dangerous for the village, so I need you to gain Uchiha Yoru's trust and obtain more in-depth intelligence. In the future, the village will need to possess intelligence within the Uchiha's high ranks. This is an extremely difficult task. Therefore, we need you at this crucial moment. You can utilize your identity. After giving the other party a meaningful glance, the Anbu chief said in a deep voice, you come from a commoner background, and you are one of the rare female ninjas. I think you should know that all of this is for the sake of the village. Upon hearing these words, young Utsugi Yugao's body trembled, a flicker of struggle seemingly appearing in her eyes. However, since everything the other person said was for the sake of the village, she remembered a disaster that befell Konoha on the night of the Ninetales. The countless cries echoing across the Konoha sky. Finally, Utsugi Yugao took a deep breath, bowed her head, and said hoarsely, understood. For the sake of the village, I will approach the target and complete the mission when the time is right. Good, you can go now. From now on, you'll be directly under my command. As the eldest daughter-in-law, she was quite familiar with this tactic. Having just forced someone to make a certain decision, she was now offering a sweet deal. Being directly under the orders of the Anbu minister, this almost means that her online presence is directed only at the Anbu minister. It's important to know that the Anbu minister's status is not simple. Their position is almost comparable to that of the heads of major clans. With this kind of trust, a warm feeling welled up in Utsugi Yugao's heart. This scene, when seen by the third Hokage's eldest daughter-in-law, revealed a glimmer of light in her eyes. Go down. Yes. In the gloomy Anbu office, surrounded only by darkness and silence, after half a day, the Anbu chief's eyes revealed a complex expression. Father, this is all for the Sarutobi clan. Shinosuke, you will definitely become the 5th Hokage. Although all of this was done to protect the Uchiha, she also had selfish motives. After Sarutobi Shinosuke became Hokage, she would be the future Hokage's wife, and the allure of power, second only to the Hokage himself in Konoha, was even more captivating. The Hokage in his office. Lord Hokage. The person who arrived was 15-year-old Chunin Yuhi Kurenai, who already displayed a brilliant and intelligent demeanor. She respectfully bowed to the Hokage. The third Hokage, upon seeing the newcomer, remained silent, smacking his lips and smoking, while Yuhi Kurenai respectfully bowed her head, awaiting orders. After a full half-day had passed, the third Hokage once again fitted the pipe with tobacco, and as the fire tribute checker transformed in his mouth, it was directly lit, and white smoke slowly emanated from it. Kurenai, now that you've grown up, you're capable of leading a ninja on your own. Facing the Hokage's polite words, and with her naturally mature personality, the nearly 15-year-old Yuki Kurenai, with a respectful smile, nodded and said, "Hokage-sama is too kind." Although still very young, it was clear that Yuki Kurenai's thinking was now more mature, not just another naive ninja. Seeing this, the third Hokage subtly inquired, "Uchiha Yoru, are you familiar with this name, Kurenai?" Upon hearing that name, Yuki Kurenai's heart suddenly trembled, but years of ninja life allowed her to maintain her composure, though she lowered her head even further. "Uchiha Yoru, my classmate, graduated as a genin at 10, became a chunin at 14, and is now a jonin at 15. He's currently the squad leader of the 7th Division of the Police Department, and is also a genius from the Uchiha clan who awakened the dual Mahatama Sharingan." Yuki Kurenai honestly revealed everything she knew about Akatsuki, because ultimately, no one could hide any of this from her. The statement that all Uchiha are geniuses isn't necessarily true, but awakening the Sharingan definitely makes them geniuses. Bloodline limits have never been logical. It's like some people are born into wealthy families, some into commoners, and some even go their whole lives unable to extract chakra. Upon hearing these words, Saratobi hears inside in distress, a complex expression appearing on his face. "Kurenai, your father is a hero of Konoha. No one wants to see the Ninetales rebellion happen." 6 months later, another wave of disaster struck, and Yuki Kurenai could not hide her grief. That night was nothing short of a natural catastrophe for Konoha, and she had lost her own father. As the third Hokage recalled that night, his eyes were filled with complex emotions. If he could go back in time, he truly didn't want this scene to happen again. "Kurenai, you must know about the Ninetales appearing in your eyes through the manipulated Sharingan, right?" Caught off guard and without time to prepare a response, Yuki Kurenai's heart skipped a beat. Countless thoughts flashed through her mind, but in the end, her eyes welled up with tears as if still caught in the memories, and she couldn't help but nod sadly, saying, "I know." This time she wasn't lying, and the third Hokage, upon hearing this, nodded happily. Then a look of disappointment appeared on his face. This Asuma kid has no sense of decency. With a single sentence, he bypassed Asuma and revealed the situation. Following this, the third Hokage shook his head and sighed, saying, "Kurenai, the Konoha border is in turmoil now. Orochimaru was originally the most suitable choice, but unfortunately, Orochimaru seems to have some problems lately." Upon hearing Yuki Kurenai's words, which were completely unexpected, Yuki Kurenai was filled with even more fear. It was simply not something she could have come into contact with. No, that wasn't right. Just moments ago, the Hokage had first inquired about Uchiha Yoru, and now he was Orochimaru's disciple. A cold sweat immediately broke out on Yuki Kurenai's back, as if she were entangled in some kind of terrifying affair. Looking at the young Yuki Kurenai, her face turned slightly pale as if she were thinking of something. This scene caught the third Hokage's eye, and he subtly nodded, realizing that his intelligence gathering was correct. Yuki Kurenai harbored resentment towards the Uchiha clan because of her father. "Kurenai, I have a mission I need you to carry out. Of course, this mission might be too difficult for you, but you can decide for yourself." Saratobi Hiruzen truly lived up to his reputation as a master of brainwashing in Konoha, and was extremely adept at using a benevolent and compassionate facade to manipulate others. His later child trafficking scheme, Orochimaru, was a direct continuation of this, though the difference was significant. After all, Saratobi had brainwashed to Mangekyo Sharingan users and a protagonist, making Orochimaru far inferior in terms of quality. The police force's training hall was sealed off, and the air was constantly filled with the sound of explosions. The vast, empty training hall was devoid of any sign of life, with only occasional flashes of electrical arcs and afterimages. The air was filled with the constant sound of tearing metal. This was the speed of martial arts performed at an extreme level, a speed invisible to the naked eye. At this moment, Uchiha Yoru's figure was almost invisible. Only when he paused briefly and turned his body did a fleeting afterimage appear. In terms of speed alone, he had almost reached the standard of a jonin. One by one, the kunai arrows suddenly struck the perimeter of the wall where the senbon crossbows had been prepared. The steel wires were severed in an instant, and the Senbon crossbows fired in all directions with a sudden burst of sound. Swish swish. In the air, only the rain-like afterimages of Senbon were unleashed, overwhelming the area with their attacks. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the training hall. It was Uchiha Yoru, now under the power of his Tamahatama Sharingan, intently watching the Senbon attacks coming from all directions. Ding ding ding. In an instant, a dense, crisp sound echoed through the air. Uchiha Yoru, wielding the Gross World Sword, was seen with his entire body flickering with electric arcs, constantly swinging and creating afterimages. The dense Senbon, like a torrential rain, was unable to get close to anyone, and around him, Senbon, having lost their momentum, broke and fell to the ground. The metal Senbon symbols clattered continuously onto the bluestone floor, producing a crisp, resonant sound. The sound suddenly stopped, and at the same time, the sound of Uchiha Yoru's heavy breathing could be heard, his whole body drenched in sweat. Looking at the extent to which the Senbon swords were broken, Uchiha Yoru gasped and couldn't help but frown inwardly. It still seems a bit lacking. He appeared to be able to defend against all the dense Senbon attacks, but only he knew that just now, a Senbon had pierced his flesh from behind, but his strong body had managed to block it. With his entire body shimmering with electric arcs, Uchiha Yoru revealed a faint smile. Indeed, talent is needed in every aspect, and now I can be considered exceptionally gifted. In the third Raikage's physical transformation, not only was his chakra attribute talent fully boosted, but his talent in taijutsu was also fully boosted. His body seemed to have inexhaustible strength, and his recent strength growth rate even doubled. Host, Uchiha Yoru second Magatama, chakra level, Jonin 1 point to miscellaneous. Chakra attributes, Fire Leave 3, Lightning Leave 5, Earth LV1, Taijutsu Swordsmanship, LV5, Healing Ninjutsu LV4. Looking at his current attributes, Uchiha Yoru revealed a satisfied smile. Although the Sharingan had boosted him, his training during this period had finally brought him to the Jonin rank. Not only had his chakra increased, but he had also initially grasped the transformations of the lightning attribute. He had officially stepped through the threshold of becoming a Jonin, and now he also possessed jutsu. Chakra quantity and lightning attribute transformations are entirely due to innate physical talent. Whether in terms of attribute transformations or martial arts training, there's a feeling of achieving great results with little effort, progressing extremely rapidly. Similarly, at his age, the peak of maturity in the ninja world is usually after 12 years old. Before 16, this age is the period of development for every ninja. The fact that taijutsu can progress so quickly, while partly due to innate physical talent, is largely thanks to the support of ninjutsu, which accounts for at least half of the credit. Because he exchanged two types of ninjutsu, the lightning release chakra form is the lightning god armor and Chidori Nagashi, passed down through generations of the Cloud Village Raikage. The true name of the lightning god armor is lightning release chakra form, a B-rank jutsu. Not bad. In the Cloud Village, this jutsu is a B-rank jutsu. While not a high-ranking jutsu, it requires the use of both internal and external secret potions in conjunction with other jutsu, making it essentially a secret technique. The documentation clearly states that this jutsu is a B-rank jutsu, and for logical reasons, it is classified as a secret technique, the lightning god armor. When combined with the precise cultivation of secret elixirs, can only be considered a secret technique, not an ordinary B-rank ninjutsu, Uchiha Yoru muttered, narrowing his eyes. Secret techniques, such as those of the Konoha Inu clans, along with the Inuzuka and Aburane clans, are not bloodline techniques, but they are different from ordinary ninjutsu. They require specific secret methods and techniques for training, and are therefore called secret techniques. The most typical example is the Akimichi clan's physique, which is clearly different from that of ordinary people. However, this type of physique, besides being inherited, also requires further cultivation through training. So their secret techniques fall within the bloodline and are on par with those of ordinary ninjas. The Thunder God armor is also a high-level secret technique. Besides the corresponding B-rank ninjutsu, it requires different stages of secret medicine as assistance, and also the accumulation of months and years of training to be effective. This, like the 8 gates, is considered a ninjutsu that is easy to learn but difficult to master. With a flash of electric light emanating from the sword of the Thunder God, Uchiha Yoru revealed a smile, the transformation of the lightning attributes properties. combined with the protection of Chidori Nagashi, can perfectly conceal the existence of the Thunder God armor. Although his strength had advanced further, and joining the ranks of Jonin provided greater security for himself, he simultaneously showed a pained expression because his treasury was running low, and the secret techniques were not cheap. Fortunately, he possessed a nearly perfect, compatible physique. Otherwise, being unable to cultivate even with only ninjutsu would be a joke. The CB and S rank system for ninjutsu not only determines the power of the technique, but also the difficulty of its training. Specialized materials often mention training difficulty levels. For example, a normal chunin would find it extremely difficult to practice a rank jutsu, but someone of the same chunin rank could find it very simple after just a few days of practice, like Hata Kakashi. The reason for all this lies in the manipulation and control of chakra. The higher the level of jutsu, the more complex the manipulation and control of chakra flow within the body becomes, and the greater the difficulty. Such rapid progress in strength, aside from the enhancements brought about by bloodline evolution and physical abilities, the ability to master ninjutsu so quickly stems entirely from exchanging Shippuden Kakashi's chakra hand seals talent. Although he is only 15 years old now, his chakra manipulation and control are already at the cage level. Kakashi's strength during the Shippuden era was roughly at the cage level. Departure. As the crackling sound of electric arcs around his body dissipated, Uchiha Yoru revealed a faint smile, slowly sheathing his sword. He casually spoke to the person outside the door, and at the same time, the twin Magatama eyes in his pupils slowly disappeared, transforming into black eyes. HMPH, Uchiha Yoru, your strength has improved very quickly lately. Suddenly, the training hall door opened, revealing Mitarashi Anko, her eyes still showing a lingering trace of shock from earlier. But she feigned an arrogant demeanor as she walked over to look at Uchiha Yoru. In her heart, she felt a pang of envy. Was this what an Uchiha was like? Simply awakening the Sharingan made them geniuses. Such talent was truly enviable. Uchiha Yoru's rapid increase in power fueled Mitarashi Anko's jealousy, and she attributed all of this to the awakening of the Sharingan, which had now evolved into Magatama Sharingan. When he saw Mitarashi Anko, Uchiha Yoru was also stunned. Although he had noticed someone peeking through the door earlier, he thought it was a police officer, never expecting it to be Anko. There's a class reunion tonight. I'll come so I can say hello to you. Will you come? Seeing Anko's arrogant gaze, Uchiha Yoru's eyes flashed with a glint of light, but he smiled and nodded, saying, "Of course I have to go to an old classmate's reunion." But deep down, he was suspicious. Anko had come to meet him. Was this someone's doing, or was he just overthinking things? In Konoha, a huge sign read QBBQ, and the aroma of grilled meat filled the air inside, indicating how popular this BBQ restaurant was. "I'm coming." Slowly pulling back the curtains of that day, Mitarashi Anko instantly let out an excited shout to everyone inside the room, in a familiar manner. Inside the wooden room, quite a few people had arrived, the most eye-catching being the relatively mature-looking Sarutobi Asuma. He had a cigarette in the corner of his mouth, and when he looked up at the newcomers, his dark eyes showed a hint of bewilderment. He then feigned a disdainful expression and scoffed, but the fighting spirit in his eyes was clearly evident. After the curtain was lifted, Mitarashi Anko excitedly shouted and immediately walked towards Yuhi Kurenai, while behind her, Uchiha Yoru came into everyone's view. When Uchiha Yoru kicked open the gate and stepped inside, the crowd was momentarily stunned, as his height had now reached approximately 1.8 meters. The physical enhancement following the growth spurt in the neck and collar of the adult body seems to lean towards developing a strong, muscular physique. Still maintaining his usual cool and aloof demeanor beneath his pure white kimono and black trousers. His broad chest slightly revealed his captivating muscles, dark wristbands covered his forearms and extended all the way to his hands, and a purple rope belt cinched his waist, securing a straight ninja sword. "Damn, still the same old me, Uchiha Yoru." Sarutobi Asuma naturally said this, as the two had never gotten along since childhood. Seeing Asuma complaining, Uchiha Yoru narrowed his eyes and chuckled, saying, "There's nothing I can do. He's growing rapidly lately." Sarutobi Asuma scoffed disdainfully, but to say he wasn't envious would be a lie. After all, his father's height genes were a problem. Luckily, he was already 1.7 meters tall. However, upon seeing Uchiha Yoru, he couldn't help but feel a surge of envy. Sarutobi Sumo was surrounded by his usual group of loyal followers, including Kamizuki Izuma and Ebisu, who, despite being classmates, formed their own small cliques. Kurenai, do you want me or not? Mitarashi Anko adopted her usual carefree and cheerful demeanor, but deep in her eyes there was still a hint of embarrassment. After all, she had initially accepted her best friend's boyfriend's money for 150,000 ryo, even though it was fake. She was still ashamed. But Yui Kurenai, facing Anko, gently smiled and gestured, saying, "Anko, you haven't changed at all." As if nothing had happened between the two close friends, Uchiha Yoru sat down next to Anko with a calm and confident smile, showing no embarrassment whatsoever. "You've never seen anyone who's shy about playing politics. Hey, no offense, we're late." Just then, the curtain lifted, revealing Mato Guy, who, with a nonchalant expression, scratched his head and greeted everyone. Immediately afterwards, he reverted to his bloodthirsty, excited state and shouted, "Come on, this time I've called Kakashi." As expected, Mato Guy, standing behind Kakashi, revealed a cold, indifferent gaze as he looked at everyone, giving a slight nod in greeting. However, his gloomy, deathly demeanor instantly dampened the atmosphere of their reunion. "Haha, Kakashi, you sit here." Mato Guy, with a frenzied and overflowing enthusiasm, pulled Kakashi down to sit beside him. At this moment, Kakashi was wearing his Anbu-style armor, looking gloomy and full of deathly aura, clearly indicating that Kakashi hadn't yet come out. Mato Guy had a Kakashi, Sarutobi Izuma Iron Man, Kamizuki Izuma Ibisu, Yui Kurenai, Mitarashi Anko, and Uchiha Yoru, a total of 9 people reunited at their class reunion. The atmosphere was momentarily somewhat subdued, but regardless of how everyone tried to hold their ground, the sense of nostalgia was evident in their eyes. No one mentioned a word about the remaining classmates. Those who could come all came, the others were either out on missions or had died in battle. Initially, although they were in the same cohort, it was clear that their ages were not all the same. Due to the unique circumstances of the war, those with better aptitude were grouped together, and the teaching staff was certainly not uniform. After all, during wartime, things wouldn't be done in stages. This class of theirs is considered a gathering of geniuses. Almost everyone in the class is gifted, and after graduation, they will be given priority training to avoid wasting resources on any task. Although Obito was just riding on the back of a cart, he had already learned fire release long ago, making him stronger than ordinary ninjas. Haha, come on! It's rare to see everyone gathered together. The lively atmosphere was further enhanced by someone like Mato Guy, a great figure who didn't seem to notice the grief everyone felt over the loss of their classmate. His enthusiastic demeanor made everyone smile, except for Kakashi. Uchiha Yoru also subtly glanced at Hada Kakashi, secretly calculating in his mind that Kakashi must have already given up on the idea at this moment. And there was a perfect opportunity to exploit him. Yui Kurenai, with her relaxed and carefree demeanor, chatted with Anko as if they were long-lost best friends, but inwardly she harbored a complex mix of emotions. Hoping her mission wouldn't encounter too many difficulties or obstacles, Sarutobi Izuma occasionally glared at Uchiha Yoru, clearly not getting along since childhood, and now, at this age, with added political considerations and clan factors, he still disliked him. Even Hada Kakashi, with his gloomy and deathly demeanor, only came to the reunion of his classmates because Mato Guy had to drag him along, otherwise, he wouldn't have come at all. He looked utterly despondent, completely oblivious to the changes in his classmates. Iron Steel, Kamizuki Izuma, and Ebisu, there's no need to say more. All 3 are commoner ninjas, having been Sarutobi Izuma's followers since their school days, and naturally still are. It's incredibly difficult for commoners to rise to prominence, so their early intelligence, coupled with their parents' guidance, saved them decades of detours. Of the 9, only Mato Guy was genuinely happy. After all, the death rate of ninjas in battle was particularly high during the 3 brutal battles, and now he could reunite with so many classmates. Naturally, he was happy. Of course, he also had selfish motives. His selfish motive was to bring Kakashi out of the shadows. Haha, I heard you became a Jonin last night, but you're the second Jonin in our class to succeed Kakashi. However, I won't give up. The 3rd Jonin will definitely be me, Mato Guy. The hot-blooded Mato guy, with a thick, beauty grin, burst into laughter. When he looked at Uchiha Yoru, he even extended his thumb in a characteristic gesture, revealing his gleaming white teeth. Seeing Mato guy's encouraging words, Uchiha Yoru rarely showed any embarrassment. After all, not everyone could look down on Mato guy. Come on, becoming a jonin doesn't automatically mean you're a jonin. Sarutobi Asuma, hearing this, immediately showed a disdainful expression, secretly mocking him, while his 3 followers behind him nodded in agreement. Ultimately, Uchiha Yoru became Orochimaru's disciple, returned to the village, and took on the role of captain of the 7th Division of the police force. Only then did he become a jonin. Compared to Kakashi, who became a jonin based purely on achievements and strength, Uchiha Yoru seemed to have become a jonin through connections, naturally causing resentment. Konoha BBQ Shop. Seeing Sarutobi Asuma and his group's arrogant demeanor, Uchiha Yoru, on the other hand, looked at them with a disdainful expression, a smile that wasn't quite a smile. With his fingers gently tapping the table, Uchiha Yoru narrowed his eyes and chuckled. Mato guy said that effort can catch up to genius, and I've never questioned that point. But there are some things that, no matter how hard you try, you can never catch up to. Sarutobi Asuma's black eyes flashed with a hint of red light in an instant. Seeing this, he scoffed disdainfully, shrugging his shoulders to indicate that today's class reunion wouldn't involve such formalities. But the faces of the 3, Kamizuki Izuma and Ibisu, showed a flash of embarrassment, their hearts filled with resentment and profound powerlessness. The Sharingan that had just flashed and disappeared was clearly a statement from the other party. I'm an Uchiha, and no matter how hard you try your whole life, you can never become part of the Uchiha clan. Guy, everyone's here. Let's get the meat on the table a little earlier. The open and covert struggles among them had escalated from fighting for pride during their ninja school days to their current political divisions. Yui Kurenai casually chuckled and teased Guy. Although Mato guy was enthusiastic, he wasn't brainless. Being thick-skinned was his personality. However, being a ninja who could observe things differently, he naturally understood Yui Kurenai's meaning and immediately displayed an open, cheerful smile. Kakashi and I are late today, so we'll treat you to a meal. It's undeniable that there were times when Mato guy's presence was truly needed. Amidst the hearty laughter, everyone seemed to cast aside their differing viewpoints. And as the grilled meats arrived, they engaged in rare banter and light-hearted conversation. Looking at everyone, Uchiha Yoru, although outwardly smiling and chatting casually with them, suddenly glanced at Kakashi, thinking to himself, could this gathering really be just for Kakashi? Kakashi had a gloomy, deathly demeanor, and it seemed this gathering was solely for the sake of the other party, especially Mato guy, whose thick-skinned laughter echoed loudly, his worried eyes never leaving Kakashi. Kakashi, you're the second among us to become a jonin after you, and you've even awakened the Sharingan. I wonder who's more powerful between the 2 of you. Okay, Mato guy, although not stupid, is thick-headed and has this idiotic personality. The more everyone else stops talking, the more Yui Kurenai rubs her forehead in frustration. How could he say something like that? He's truly defeated by you. Mitarashi Anko, with her arrogant demeanor, looked at Mato guy and said, Teacher Orochimaru has devoted himself to teaching Yoru, and his strength is definitely not inferior to Kakashi's. It seemed as if she was afraid that Uchiha Yoru, this jonin, was too much of a troublemaker and would embarrass her teacher, so Mitarashi Anko tried her best to bring up Orochimaru. Clearly, this name is very well chosen, but Sarutobi Asuma wouldn't be intimidated by it. Teacher, you're Orochimaru, but I'm still the strongest 3rd Hokage, he thought. Sarutobi Asuma offered a congratulatory smile, but his eyes held a hint of provocation. Uchiha Yoru naturally understood the implication. After all, there was a 3-Tamo Sharingan user here. However, Uchiha Yoru, completely unfazed, waved his hand and laughed, saying, Asuma, you're too kind. After all, I haven't let down the Uchiha title. Just like you, I inherited the 3rd Hokage's addiction to drugs. Upon hearing Uchiha Yoru teasing Asuma about inheriting his father's smoking addiction, Mitarashi Anko burst into laughter, instantly chuckling, and said with a carefree, hearty laugh, I really didn't notice. Asuma, when did you learn to smoke? Among them, the one who would be most thoughtless, besides Mato guy, is Mitarashi Anko, since Anko became Orochimaru's disciple right after graduating. With such a strong backing, all he needed to do was increase his strength. Surrounded by envious and sycophantic gazes, he naturally wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. Class reunions, indeed, regardless of the world. As thoughts gradually mature, this so-called gathering has transformed. Each person has their own small group, which could be described as just 9 individuals attending a class reunion, yet it represents a miniature political scene in the village. Ew, Kakashi, let's settle this once and for all. This time, let's see who can eat the most. The hot-blooded, thick-skinned Mato guy shouted, wanting to call out to Kakashi with passion. But at this moment, Kakashi, facing the vibrant energy radiating from his friend, calmly stared at the food with wide, watery eyes. Good. The word was uttered calmly, yet it seemed to have lost all vitality. What appeared to be an agreement was more like a gloomy, deathly acceptance, as if unwilling to be disturbed. Mato guy, with a look of fighting spirit and fervent enthusiasm, devoured the food like a hungry tiger, while Kakashi, with his mask pulled down, chewed slowly and deliberately. Because everyone could only see half of Kakashi's face when he bowed his head, it didn't matter what Kakashi looked like at that moment. What mattered was that Kakashi's current situation was extremely dangerous. Ninjas were essentially conduits for war, trained as weapons and tools. This gloomy, death-filled appearance not only reflects indifference to the lives of others, but also to their own. Kakashi, are your Sharingans still usable? At that moment, Uchiha Yoro casually chuckled, a flash of red light appearing and then disappearing in his eyes. He briefly opened his Sharingan, fulfilling a long-held wish to see Kakashi's true face. Upon hearing this, everyone was startled, some frowned, and Sarutobi Isuma, who didn't get along with him, snorted disapprovingly. With an arrogant gaze, he observed Uchiha Yoro and mockingly said, Kakashi rose to Jonin rank at 12 years old based on his achievements, and even created the rank Jetsu Chidori. And yet some people only know how to imitate others. It's clear Sarutobi Isuma is looking for trouble, or rather, he dislikes Uchiha Yoro, and this is the perfect opportunity for Kakashi to teach him a lesson. When Kakashi heard this, he instinctively wanted to cover his eyes, but his stiff movements made him retract them. He lowered his head and coldly said, the Sharingan is very useful. That year, he was the most arrogant genius, but now he's become like this, causing everyone to shake their heads in disbelief. Uchiha Yoro, however, just smiled and shook his head, saying, Kakashi, the Sharingan isn't that easy to control. He said these were all true words, but in Mato Guy's eyes, he thought the other person was eyeing Kakashi's Sharingan. After all, this was the Uchiha clan. Mato Guy immediately burst into laughter and said, Yoro, Kakashi has inherited Obito's legacy, and he certainly won't let the Sharingan down. Seeing Mato Guy's misunderstanding, Uchiha Yoro chuckled softly, Guy, perhaps you misunderstood. Once the Uchiha have approved of Kakashi, they won't change their minds. I was merely offering a friendly reminder as a fellow student. Konoha barbecue restaurant outside. Under the cover of night, the streets were sparsely populated. Most people were indoors preparing to rest, with only a few ninjas and ordinary citizens engaged in their daily work scattered around. As night fell, the shadows loomed large, like the shadows of the heavenly ninja, with tiny black dots flickering and jumping among the houses in the village. Kakashi. Distinguishing the moment and lamenting that he could never return to the past, Uchiha Yoro's call reached him. Hada Kakashi turned his head, his gaze dark and filled with deathly aura, as if asking, Is there something you need? Seeing Kakashi's expression, Uchiha Yoro shook his head, but then noticed Mato Guy's expectant gaze, and a hint of selfishness crept into his heart. He immediately chuckled and said, We don't know when we'll meet again, so how about the training ground? Unable to push aside a rock, unable to wash his hands clean, unable to deactivate his Sharingan, unable to experience the intimacy of heaven. This is the life of Hada Kakashi. If we were to say who the most tragic character in the Hokage saga is, it would be difficult to say, but Hada Kakashi is definitely at the top of that list. Losing his father at the age of 7 left him alone, further turning him into a cold, mechanical figure who only knew how to complete tasks. Just when he finally found warmth and connection, he faced the sacrifice of a comrade. First, Uchiha Obito was struck in half, unable to budge the rock. Then, he used Chidori to stab Nohara Rin in the chest, staining his hands crimson with blood that he could never wash away. In 3 battles, Kakashi lost all his teammates, and during the Ninetales Rebellion, he lost his teacher and his teacher's wife. Wow, a duel between genius ninjas. Haha, Kakashi is living the life of youth. At this moment, Madogai, after seeing Uchiha Yoru's questioning, immediately became wildly excited and shouted, even slapping Kakashi's shoulder repeatedly, "Kakashi, you are the most outstanding genius ninja of Konoha. Before the other genius ninjas of the same generation, let's have a duel. Let's see who gets to the training ground first." After saying that, Madogai awkwardly winked at Uchiha Yoru, as if saying thank you. Uchiha Yoru, however, just shrugged and chuckled. He understood Madogai's desire to help Kakashi. He didn't think it would be of much use, but it gave him a chance. No one knew what Uchiha Nightheart was thinking, but as the gathering was about to end, everyone became interested after hearing what he said, especially Sarutobi Asuma, who gave Kakashi a meaningful smile. "Kakashi, this time you want to show us the true strength of a Jonin." When he said the last few words, Sarutobi Asuma's tone became slightly louder, clearly indicating he was looking forward to seeing a joke. Seeing this scene, Yui Kurenai's eyes reddened as she looked at Anko beside her with a hopeful gaze. Immediately, a glint of light flashed in her beautiful eyes. Perhaps Night wasn't as naive as outsiders thought. After all, Night was Orochimaru's disciple. Hada Kakashi, with a deadpan expression, looked at everyone. He naturally saw through their intentions and was about to refuse when Madogai directly put his arm around his shoulder and laughed loudly, saying, "Kakashi, I'm your eternal rival. Before you geniuses duel, let's be the first to decide the winner. I'll count to 3, and we'll see who arrives first at training ground number 43. Kakashi and the Uchiha are dueling, both possessing Sharingan of that caliber. You shouldn't lose face tonight." Mitarashi Anko, never one to shy away from big action, excitedly waved her hand to encourage the two, instantly creating a lively atmosphere. "I'll be the referee." Mitarashi Anko, with a mischievous grin, walked up to everyone, raised both hands high, and first pointed at Kakashi and Madogai, shouting, "Are you all equipped? Let's start the first round. 3, 2, 1, start." With a single command, Madogai, his blood boiling with enthusiasm, let out a loud shout and instantly transformed into a green blur, speeding through the streets of Konoha. Hada Kakashi, though wanting to refuse, clearly had no chance. Moreover, Madogai was always looking for an opportunity to duel him, so he instinctively followed closely behind. But his indifferent demeanor clearly showed he didn't take the challenge seriously. Training ground number 43. Under the moonlight, a gust of wind swept across the grassy training ground, sending leaves swirling down. Hada Kakashi's calm and indifferent figure appeared, followed closely by a series of shadowy figures in pursuit. "I love you, Kakashi. You truly are my eternal rival." This match was quite comical. It was clear that Madogai lost, but he didn't show any signs of defeat or disappointment. On the contrary, he was filled with fighting spirit and laughed loudly, even giving Kakashi a thumbs-up gesture, as if trying to rally Kakashi with this tactic. But Kakashi, at only 15 years old, has experienced so many tragedies in his life that, frankly, it would be surprising if he hadn't fallen into darkness. Watching Madogai's clumsy acting, it was clear that this was Madogai's own friend deliberately trying to provoke his fighting spirit. But Hada Kakashi still showed not the slightest ripple in his eyes, even maintaining the calm, indifferent demeanor as he looked at everyone. "Asuma, you said Chidori is strong, but is Kakashi even better?" At that moment, a swarm of flu-like black shadows flickered into view from behind. Sarutobi Asuma, having just fallen to the ground, pulled a cigarette from his cigarette case and held it in the corner of his mouth. Ibisu, who had just arrived, casually spoke to Asuma, as if nonchalantly. A moment later, Ibisu seemed to realize he had said something wrong and couldn't help but feel embarrassed, slightly lowering his head and pushing his eyes down. His sunglasses effectively concealed his gaze, while Asuma, standing beside him, slowly curved his lips into a smile. He said nothing more, but instead flicked his lighter and lit the cigarette at the corner of his mouth. It's very clear that this is Ebisu, because he's deliberately bringing it up by clinging to someone's leg. This point is not uncommon in any other world. There's always someone who clings to someone's leg, wanting to climb above them. Even Uchiha Yoru wasn't that kind of person, was he? Haha, Kakashi, next up is your challenge night. At this moment, Madogai's enthusiasm was clearly focused on Kakashi. He feigned a loud laugh, gesticulating wildly and giving a thumbs up, then turned his head and winked at Uchiha Yoru, as if to say, tonight, you'd better get Kakashi's fighting spirit back. In school, Madogai's best friend, besides Kakashi, was arguably Uchiha Yoru, since Yoru had never looked down on him. At training ground number 43, bathed in moonlight, everyone, being ninja, could see clearly. Mitarashi Anko, her face full of excitement, cheered, "Yoru, you can't let teacher Orochimaru down." As Yui Kurenai observed the atmosphere, a glint of light flashed in her eyes. Sarutobi Asuma, with a cigarette in his mouth, casually lowered his gaze, his eyes fixed intently on the training ground. Behind him, Kamizuki Izuma and Ibisu also wore serious expressions. Just how powerful was Hada Kakashi, the genius ninja of their generation? And what about the awakened Uchiha bloodline? Yui Kurenai and Mitarashi Anko were also watching the center of the arena. Among the crowd, only Madogai secretly gave Uchiha Yoruichi a signal, indicating that she should give it her all, and there was no shortage of worrying in his eyes. Konoha, Training Ground No. 43. Under the moonlight, the training ground outside was filled with the solemn gazes of Madogai, Sarutobi Asuma, Mitarashi Anko, Yui Kurenai, Iron Man, Kamizuki Izuma, and Ibisu 7 Chunin, who were all intently watching the center of the field. The tall, mature-looking Uchiha Yoru and the quiet, reserved Hada Kakashi looked at each other. They were classmates at school, though their relationship wasn't particularly close, as Kakashi had graduated not long after arriving. But he was definitely one of the few good friends Kakashi had. "Kakashi, perhaps we can back down." Uchiha Yoru chuckled and shrugged. Although someone had deliberately pushed him forward, he also had a bit of selfishness. Losing wouldn't hurt, after all. The other person was Konoha's most dazzling genius, and defeating him would bring him fame. Hada Kakashi looked at Uchiha Yoru, then at the glances thrown at him by all his classmates. Perhaps someone else was plotting something, but everyone else was also kindly trying to provoke his fighting spirit, and he naturally saw through this. Good. At this point, Kakashi was still an Anbo, and his life was at its darkest point. His language was concise, direct, and clear, and his entire aura exuded coldness and indifference. The night wind blew. A single leaf slowly drifted down, and as everyone watched intently, the two figures vanished from the spot in an instant. Break. When Kakashi and Uchiha Yoru reappeared, they were already engaging in a rapid-fire taijutsu battle. The initial contempt the onlookers had shown for Uchiha Yoru vanished instantly, replaced by serious expressions. It's important to know that they are all Chunin, even Asuma, Yui Kurenai, and Mitarashi Anko are elite Chunin. In their eyes, they see only afterimages of the two combatants. In terms of taijutsu alone, the two of them had surpassed the Chunin category. So fast! At this moment, Uchiha Yoru was secretly astonished. It's no wonder he became a Jonin at 12 years old. If he didn't lack the protagonist's halo, this talent alone would be truly monstrous. Kakashi is incredibly fast. This can be seen from the original story. Kakashi's style leans towards speed, from his early swordsmanship to his later Chidori. With all the chakra attributes and other extraordinary talents, he's practically the quintessential protagonist. Even Hada Kakashi, who was constantly sparring with Uchiha Yoru, was secretly shocked. The unremarkable Uchiha Yoru from back then at the school had become so powerful. Fast. No, not just fast. It's heavy. Kakashi's expression turned serious. The opponent was incredibly fast, but more importantly, their strength was far greater. Each punch was like a heavy artillery shell, and now both his arms were trembling slightly. At this moment, Hada Kakashi was secretly terrified. Was this the power of a bloodline ninja? It's important to know that in the original Chunin exam, Sasuke was completely defeated by Lee in taijutsu, but in the grand tournament against Gaara, Lee was so shocked by Sasuke's fighting style that he exclaimed, "Is this what a genius is?" I spent years training in taijutsu, and Sasuke only took a month. Awakening a bloodline ability or evolving will strengthen oneself, causing the original body's power to experience a brief period of explosive growth. Therefore, Hada Kakashi was shocked to believe that Uchiha Yoru's ability to become so much stronger in just half a year was due to the awakening of the Sharingan and its evolution to Tamagatama. With a screech of brakes, the two figures quickly retreated. In terms of martial arts, they were almost evenly matched, and both were intimidated by the other's strength. So fast! Mato Gai, observing from the sidelines, watched the battle with eyes blazing with intensity. In a taijutsu contest like this, he could only put up a fight by activating Hakumen. The moment the two separated, Uchiha Yoru's figure recoiled, a smile appearing on his face, his hands instantly beginning to perform a dazzling, chaotic series of hand seals. Fire release, great fireball technique. In the blink of an eye, the hand seals for this C-rank Jutsu Tiger, Snake, Pig, Noon, Tiger were complete. Before the two figures had even stopped moving, to Hada Kakashi's astonished gaze, the other had already unleashed the jutsu. Chakra gathered at the back of his throat, Uchiha Yoru spewed a massive fireball forward from his mouth. Immediately, a 3-meter-high fireball surged forward, instantly filling the entire training ground with an intense heat. Seeing this scene, the onlookers were filled with even more shock. Even Mitarashi Anko was terrified, muttering in disbelief, "How could it be so fast?" Knowing how to perform hand seals is crucial, but it's also related to the speed at which chakra flows and circulates within the body. This is either a natural talent from birth or something that requires rigorous training. Although this is only a C-rank jutsu, its release speed is enough to shock them. They had seen Jonin unleash jutsu before, but it was clear that Uchiha Yoru's jutsu release speed far surpassed that of a normal Jonin. Fire release, great fireball technique. Kakashi also hastily formed hand seals to counterattack, but by the time the opponent's jutsu was unleashed, he could barely complete the seals. In an instant, the two fireballs began to collide. The difference was that Kakashi, after releasing his jutsu, quickly retreated because the distance between the colliding jutsu was too close. A deafening explosion sent flames flying in all directions. At this moment, Hada Kakashi revealed his left eye, the 3-Tamo Sharingan. His face was filled with a serious expression. This time, he completely considered his opponent to be an equal. Water release, water bullet technique. The onlookers, their eyes shining with admiration, were filled with awe at Kakashi's combat experience. In the instant the fireballs collided, he retreated to the training ground's water hole, immediately forming hand seals with incredible speed. Although not as fast as Uchiha Yoru's, his speed was still extremely impressive. Tiger, bad god, rooster, god, nothing. The 6 seals were instantly formed, and in an instant, the water in the lake surged downwards, and a shark-shaped water projectile, 2 or 3 meters in diameter, swiftly attacked Uchiha Yoru. Kakashi has the most extensive combat experience. After all, years of battlefield killing and life have formed instincts, something Uchiha Yoru lacks. But to everyone's astonishment, Uchiha Yoru, facing Hada Kakashi's jutsu, chose not to dodge, and at that moment, his hands quickly formed hand seals, which was even more unexpected. Fire release, a tough guy. In the blink of an eye, after completing the hand seals, Uchiha Yoru's chakra gathered in his mouth, and suddenly, in an instant, he unleashed an extremely large-scale fire release attack. Rumble! At that moment, Hada Kakashi, with his 3-Tamo Sharingan clearly visible above the water, knew something was wrong when he saw Uchiha Yoru making hand seals. This was a B-rank fire release jutsu. His instincts kicked in, and Hada Kakashi hastily began forming hand seals, preparing to use his advantage of being in the water to unleash a water release jutsu that countered water release. The B-rank water jutsu, which Kakashi had just released with great ferocity, suddenly surged forth, directly striking the C-rank water bullet. A hissing sound echoed, followed by a cloud of steam rising. The immense power of the fire vaporized the water bullet, its residual force continuing to sweep forward. It's too late. Hada Kakashi didn't have time to release his jutsu with both hands, but facing the incoming fire attack, his extensive combat experience allowed him to directly control the chakra in his legs, instantly plunging himself into the water. Rumble! The entire lake was engulfed in flames, illuminating everyone's flushed faces. Their eyes shone brightly, yet also held a hint of fear. Great, that was quick! In the training ground, Hada Kakashi and Uchiha Yoru were sparring, their dazzling and chaotic ninjutsu causing a continuous stream of surprised expressions in everyone's eyes. Even Sarutobi Isuma, who had never faced such a situation before, showed a look of shock. The speed of hand seals represents the speed and control of chakra flow within a ninja's body. It can be said that this skill, aside from innate talent, can only be achieved through continuous training and practice. There are no shortcuts. It's like some people are born with all their meridians open, while others must open each one individually. The speed at which a ninja's chakra flows and the precise control it exerts within their body almost represent the difficulty of their ninjutsu training. Some ninjas, even those of Jonin rank, may never be able to train S-rank ninjutsu in their lifetime because they simply cannot meet the necessary conditions. Everyone looked at Uchiha Yoru's blood-red Sharingan eyes and the two constantly spinning Magatama, and immediately a wave of jealousy surged through them. Ebisu's eyes widened in disbelief as he muttered to himself, "Is this a ninja bloodline limit? Ordinary ninjas may strive, and they may even believe that their efforts can surpass those of genius, but the existence of bloodline ninjas shatters this notion of genius, and is also the reason for the feelings of powerlessness and envy that arise in their hearts." Uchiha Yoru initially could only be described as having decent talent, considered top tier in the class, but after his eyes were opened, his talent steadily surpassed all others. Even Madogai's eyes showed a hint of fear at this moment. Awakening a bloodline limit is so powerful. Even though Kakashi, a genius, had spent years striving to achieve his current level of chakra control, his opponent surpassed him in just half a year. But it was only for a moment before Madogai suddenly became agitated and shouted loudly, his enthusiasm and passion soaring, "Ha ha, this is youth, burn brightly, youth." That's good. Thanks to Madogai's antics, the emotional shock that had affected everyone's state of mind instantly dissipated by more than half. It must be said that having such a classmate was fortunate. Meanwhile, inside the training ground, Kakashi, facing the arduous task of using fire release on this large area, with his extensive experience, directly chose to dive into the lake, using the terrain to evade the opponent's ninjutsu. The flames had just died down, and the surface of the lake was still radiating heat when suddenly bubbles burst forth, and Kakashi, leaping out of the lake, instantly spotted Uchiha Yoru rapidly attacking. A sudden flash of lightning flickered beneath Yoru's screen. Seeing this, Kakashi instinctively released Chidori, another jutsu, into his palm. In an instant, two streaks of lightning flashed under the moonlight, causing everyone's hearts to race. Flashes of lightning streaked across the sky, Chidori's incessant, deafening roar echoed in everyone's ears, and some spectators breathed a sigh of relief, others showed excitement, while a portion displayed expressions of disbelief. All that could be seen was a flash of lightning on the surface of the lake. The lightning in Kakashi's hand flickered between bright and dim, and a hand, like steel, was wrapped around his wrist. "Is this the ninjutsu technique you developed?" At this moment, Hada Kakashi's eyes were filled with a complex expression. He saw Uchiha Yoru's entire body flickering with dazzling electric arcs, one hand gripping his wrist. The Chidori, not yet fully formed, was now flashing on and off. Based on the Chidori research on ninjutsu, this ninjutsu is called Chidori Nagashi. With a gentle nod, the electric arc emanating from his body began to dissipate, and he slowly released Kakashi's grip. The two stood on the surface of the lake, gazing at each other, Uchiha Yoru revealing a smile. "Kakashi, at this crucial moment, you were distracted, and it seems I saw fear in your eyes." At this moment, Uchiha Yoru's expression gradually became serious, and he couldn't help but secretly shake his head and sigh, saying, "Kakashi, war wounds need time to heal. You are no longer suitable for the Anbu. If you are willing, the Konoha Police Department welcomes you." One final blow landed on Kakashi, but the jutsu didn't activate successfully. Or perhaps it was a war after effect. When he released Chidori, a look of fear suddenly appeared in his eyes. Knowing the cause and effect, Uchiha Yoru couldn't help but shake his head inwardly. Was it because of Nohara Rin? She had personally killed her own comrade and still hadn't gotten over it. Such a scene appeared in the original work. She couldn't wash her hands clean. At this moment, Kakashi felt an inexplicable sense of unease. In a jutsu duel, his opponent could even counter his attacks, and this was the first time he had encountered such overwhelming dominance in a jutsu duel. It wasn't about power, but about controlling the speed of release. It felt as if he were fighting against his future self from a decade or so. Ultimately, he was defeated because he himself had researched the Chidori Jutsu. He failed to successfully unleash it, while his opponent unleashed a Chidori Nagashi based on his own research. How frustrating! Especially after the opponent's final push. Although Hada Kakashi was feeling annoyed after the match was over, he calmly pulled down his headband and once again covered his Sharingan. Ew, Kakashi, you're not really suited to being an Anbo right now. As the battle ended, everyone crowded around to watch, especially Mato Guy, who directly showed a serious and worried expression. Looking at Kakashi, he voiced his thoughts, and the others nodded in agreement. They had all seen it clearly just now. Although Uchiha Yura managed to stop Kakashi with his jutsu, ninja combat isn't about those things. With the final blow, they all saw Kakashi suddenly become distracted, causing his jutsu to fail. The fight looked like Uchiha Yura was winning, but it was clearly due to Kakashi's distraction, and besides, they were only sparring. Kakashi, you're really not suited for Endo work right now. Even Yuhi Kiranai, who usually didn't meddle in other people's affairs, showed a serious expression and solemnly said to Kakashi. They all clearly saw what happened to Kakashi just now. Luckily, it was just a discussion between classmates. If this had happened on the battlefield or during a mission, it would have been extremely dangerous. Kakashi, you need to rest. Sarutobi Asuma also stepped forward at this moment, speaking with a serious expression. They didn't want to see their classmate fall ill during a mission because of war wounds. The war was over, Kakashi had survived the most brutal 3 battles, and if he had fallen during a normal mission or due to mental trauma, it would have been a real loss. They were classmates, perhaps there was some rivalry, and even the eccentric Hada Kakashi didn't like living together. But similarly, there was no personal gain or petty political struggle. So everyone was purely concerned about each other as classmates. Seeing the worried looks in everyone's eyes, Kakashi calmly and indifferently nodded slightly. Yes, I know. Kakashi nodded casually, causing everyone to frown. From Kakuzu's perspective, they were classmates, and he certainly didn't want them to fail this mission. On a larger scale, Kakashi was a jonin, and arguably Konoha's most outstanding genius at the moment. They didn't want the village to lose such a talent.